Hi and welcome back. In this training video, we're going to discuss the issue of external bleeding control. Of all the bandages you do in your training today, this is paramount that we get right. So we'll spend a few minutes on it. First and foremost, because there's blood simulated, I'm going to be wearing gloves. Our casualty here, Albert, has fallen over and he's received an incision or a laceration to the forearm. Incision is a clean cut, laceration is a tear to the flesh. I've already conducted a primary survey, make sure his airway's okay, no other injuries of priority. By the way, blood loss, of course, is secondary, is the second highest level of priority after airway, so we'll get onto it straight away. A couple of items we can use in a first aid kit. You can choose a combine dressing, which is a sterile non-stick dressing, and that's got absorbent properties, and we could use a crepe bandage around there. We could also use, of course, the number 13 and 14 wound dressing from a first aid kit. And of course, that's the 2-in-1. And they look like so, because you need an absorbent pad. They're very, very handy, that were used actually in World War I, still packed in military kits. So it's a non-elastic bandage with a pad there. And what we're going to be using in this presentation, and for what you'll be using in class, is a trusty triangular bandage. As you take them out of their packaging, please leave it as a pad. Whether incision or laceration, it's a high flow wound. We've inspected it to see there's no debris. I bring the flesh together, and the first phase of external bleeding control is simply direct pressure on the bleed. So I'll place that there firm. Albert's in a condition that he can assist me, so he'll place his hand over the top and keep the pressure on there. That allows me to get a medium or a heavy crepe roller bandage. They come in different widths, and this is a medium crepe 7.5 centimetre width bandage. Now, we're going to start at the base. I like to work with the barrel facing up, and we'll anchor twice just below the pad, just as an anchor. 1 and 2. Now I've anchored it. Thank you. I can hold on to that. And by keeping the stretch on the pad, we work our way systematically up the bandage. Utilise the elastic properties of the roller bandage here to control the pressure. So a couple of envelopments here. I've worked my way up, and now just beyond that pad, so there's no germs that come in, and now I'll work my way back down. Once that's done, I've used up about half to 2/3 of the roller bandage. A couple of things we can do here. We can cut that down and tape it down. We could cut that, split it down the middle and tie it off. Or, if you wish, we can just go a little bit of a space, bring that round, so I've got 2 fingers on the opposite of the pad, and I can just tuck the surplus in there. Next thing is check circulation. When checking circulation, make sure that we've checked the circulation, what's normal for the casualty. In this case, Albert does have cold hands, and we're just checking for any significant difference in colour and what's called capillary refill, where you push down and say on the nail bed and compare to the other side and see how long it takes for the colour to come back. In the event that there is nail polish, just press on the back of the hand. So we check circulation. First phase of external bleeding control, direct pressure, rest, check circulation. Second phase of external bleeding control. Hypothetically, in this case now, blood has soaked through the initial bandage. What do? We can either, if the original bandage was loose, it wasn't a proper first aid kit available, it was an improvised bandages and pads, a tea towel from an accident in the kitchen, for example, and the pad and the bandage was quite loose and flimsy, it's best to take it off. So if the original bandage is loose, take it off. In this case, it's not loose, so what we will do now is apply another pad over the top. So we obtain a second pad in this case, and we place it directly over the top, and with the surplus, we apply more direct pressure, as being demonstrated at the moment. Again, for pressure, definitely document that you have now applied a second amount of pressure. Now, when we come through to this, we can now either tape it down, cut it, split it down the middle and tie it off, or we can just tuck it in. Again, check circulation, and in this case, we can certainly see that there is some discoloration occurring now. However, that's to be expected since it is a second amount of pressure. Unfortunately for Albert, we notice a few minutes later the blood soaks through again. We now are in a situation where we have uncontrolled external bleeding. An ambulance must be called immediately. You would have called an ambulance with a deep laceration or incision earlier anyway. And after many years in the wilderness, the arterial tourniquet is now reintroduced into basic first aid in a workplace situation. As the name suggests, an arterial tourniquet must block the artery. It has to be applied along a single shaft bone, which is either the upper arm or the thigh. We can't place it onto the forearm or the lower leg because the artery runs between the two bones on these areas. So we obtain either a 7.5 centimetre bandage, and similar to a blood pressure cuff, we bind it around the bicep tricep girth, very firm, exactly as per a blood pressure cuff. You can see that I'm deliberately occupying a significant width so it doesn't cut in, and at this point this is done very tightly. It will cause some distress and pain for the casualty. A couple of critical important things here. Document the time that you've put it on. Keep it rested. In the event that the casualty goes into shock, we will cover Albert, but we'll leave the limb that is exposed out so that when the ambulance arrives, they can see clearly. We'll be guided by the ambulance if it's more than 30 minutes. Ideally, you wish to try to take that off. Be guided by the ambulance as to whether to take off. Typically, we don't. Document the time you put it on, and that's the third phase. There is one other thing we could apply if your risk assessment was to suggest that you purchase it, and it's called a hemostatic dressing. Now, these have been used in the military since the early 2000s globally in all armed services around the world. It is a specialised dressing with a chemical embedded in it, and this chemical is water loving. It draws all the water out of the blood. Now, 90% of blood is made of water. It's what we call a hydrophilic chemical. So embedded in the wound, if we didn't want to use a tourniquet and we had hemostatic dressings, I would, as a last resort now, put that deep into the wound, put the pressure on. Now the chemical reaction occurs, draws all the water out of the blood into the pad, and the clotting agents called platelets will then seal it up. And we believe, the research suggests, that an arterial blood loss which spurts bright red can actually be ceased within 3 to 4 minutes. So in summary, first phase of external bleeding, direct pressure check circulation. Second phase of external bleeding, if it comes through, either put another pattern bandage, or if the original bandage was loose or flimsy, take it off. And the third phase of external bleeding is the application of an arterial tourniquet. Document the time, call an ambulance, and or if you have available and trained, use a hemostatic dressing directly in the wound. Thanks for listening. I'm Ori, this is Albert, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.